Bonjour les élèves. Sorry about that. So we learned that direct object pronouns le, la, and les can be used to mean he or him or her or it. So we can use them to mean people or things. Now we're going to learn about the indirect object pronouns. These are indirect objects, lui and leur. You'll notice there are only two of them. There's one for the singular, lui, and one for the plural, LEUR. So let's observe the difference between a direct and an indirect object in the following sentences. Paul lance le ballon à Luc. Think about what is directly receiving the action. Is Paul throwing the ball or is he throwing Luc? He's directly throwing the ball, so that is the direct object. Paul lance le ballon. That is the direct object. So that makes Luc an indirect object. Paul lance le ballon. He's not throwing Luc, but he's throwing something to Luc. So pause if you need to and get this written down, and I will go on. This is going to be a very important part of this, and I'm going to have some additional notes here on which we'll have an open note quiz. In the sentence we saw about the ball, le ballon is the direct object because it is the direct receiver of the action of the verb. What does Paul throw? The ball. The indirect object indicates to whom the ball is thrown. Luc is the indirect object of the verb. To whom does Paul throw the ball? To Luc. Note that the indirect object is preceded by the preposition à, meaning to, à Luc. So if you have some difficulty, this is the extra stuff, if you have some difficulty figuring out whether something is a direct or an indirect object, these rules might help. A person or thing not preceded by a preposition, that means it doesn't have a preposition coming before it, is a direct object. So for instance, j'ai acheté le livre, the book. You notice there's no preposition here before the object, to the book, at the book, whatever. Je l'ai acheté, so you're going to use le, I bought it, okay? Now, if a person is preceded by the preposition à or pour is new for us. This is not in the original notes. Then it is an indirect object. Now pour is going to have a special case if we mean for but not like on behalf of, and we'll see that in a minute. So, j'ai acheté un livre pour Paul. If I bought a book for Paul, je lui ai acheté un livre. And that is why we would use this indirect, because you didn't buy Paul, right? You bought a book for Paul. So here they say pour is only used for indirect objects when it's the sense of a recipient, right? I bought something for you. Je te l'ai acheté. That's indirect. Okay, not when it means on behalf of. For instance, il parle pour nous. He speaks on our behalf. So continuing, we also are going to have some verbs that we're just going to recognize as verbs that generally take a direct object, verbs that will take an indirect object. So, me, vous really work for either one of them. The ones that we have to know for sure which ones can only be used with the verb and the indirect object are this new one, lui and leur. So a direct object, if you think about it, all of these verbs right here, aider, aimer, amener, etc., to wait for someone, even though we say for, it's not in French. We don't use that in French. To watch someone, to invite someone, or something, okay, to forget something or someone. These are the words that we are going to use, those direct objects. So if we're talking about a singular person, le or la, or L apostrophe, or if it's a plural person, we're going to use les or things as well. And these are going to be these direct objects. They directly receive the action of seeing, looking at, leaving, etc. These right here, you'll all notice, are followed by the preposition à, parler à, rendre visite à, which means to visit a person, to answer a person, and to call a person. Pause if you need to, take these down, and try to understand that you can directly do these things to a person or an object, but here you would parler à, you're going to speak words to that person. You're going to give an answer to. So these are words that are going to take an indirect object. The indirect object pronouns in French are LUI and LEUR, which we know, and the masculine and feminine forms are the same. So let's look at the following chart and pause as you need to. So le médecin parle à Pierre or à Marie, we would say il lui parle. In the plural, le médecin parle à ses patients or à ses patientes. We would say for both of those, il leur parle. The placement of LUI and LEUR is nothing new for us. Here we're going to put them, as always, right before the verb they are linked to. Je lui parle. Je ne lui parle pas. Je veux lui parler. Remember, you can't want to someone, right? So it has to go to talk to him. Je ne veux pas lui parler. So that's it. What I'm going to do is show you 5 questions that I want you to answer according to the directions. You'll pause, and then you're going to answer these questions. Please note that at the end of this presentation, there are some verbs that can either be direct or indirect usage. Copy those down and be ready to talk about your idea on why those verbs or when they would be used in which case. Here are the questions. Pause and then solve them. Now here are the answers. Here is the list of verbs that will take either a direct or an indirect object. I also see that we've got quite a few of them here that are missing accents, at least one I see. So sorry about that, but we'll go over them in class. Merci, au revoir.